Hello, and welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, my name is Layla, and today I'm going to be giving a reading wrap-up for the month of March 2024. I read 5 books in March. I had a pretty good reading month. I was just on a roll. And throughout the month, as I was reading the books, I was taking notes in my phone and making sure I rated them in my note section so that I could come back to this. Now, there is Goodreads, and I could take notes in Goodreads and rate them on Goodreads, but for some reason I don't use it. I use Goodreads to track what I'm reading, and then if there's ever a 5 stars, I will rate it 5 stars in Goodreads. But anyways, let's get to the books. I read 2 romance books and then 3 thrillers, I guess you could say, or mystery. Yeah. The first book I read is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez, and I give this a 4.5 stars out of 5. This was so good. I think this is my new favorite romance book. I really don't know. I couldn't tell you what my favorite romance book before this was, but this is it now, or this is the new one if I did have one. This is the first time I've read an Abby Jimenez book, and I've heard of her. I've heard great things about her books, but I want to talk about her for a second. Not only is she an author, but she's a baker, and she owns Nadia Cakes Bakeries, which she mentions in her other book, but I'll get to that in just a moment. I think she might, I don't know if she mentions it in this, but it's kind of cute because she brings it up in her book. She's also a Food Network winner, and yeah, she just seems like my type of gal, like killing it in all the realms of life, and I love that. But this book follows Alexis and Daniel. And what I love about this book, and actually something every single book has in common that I read in March, is the difference in chat, like the back and forth. You get the point of view from Alexis, and then you get the point of view from Daniel. That happens in all these books. They're kind of just like switching between 2 scenarios at least. I really love that about a book because it makes me want to keep reading. Like if I read about Alexis, but then it's Daniel, but I want to hear about Alexis's side, like I love that. That usually can capture my attention pretty quickly, and it'll just like make me want to keep reading. That was definitely the case for this. Like I did not want to put this book down. I was so invested in it, just wanted to keep on reading it. But anyways, Alexis, she is a surgeon, a doctor, and she works at a hospital, and her family wants her to continue this legacy, and I think she's going to become like, she's going to get a big promotion and become like chief or something or other. Daniel, on the other hand, he lives in the countryside, like in this town with barely any people, very close-knit community. They all know each other. He has like a baby goat. He has a small, it's like his relatives, maybe his aunt's house, somebody's house. I can't remember the specifics. I'm sorry. But he runs that as like a bed and breakfast. And then he also does carpentry. So he's very much this like countryman. And that's kind of why it's called Part of Your World. And you're seeing the split because their lives are just very different from one another. But Alexis ends up in this small town, ends up in a ditch. And then Daniel helps her out of this ditch, and that's how they first meet. But then they see each other again in this small town, and it goes from there. And Daniel, he's kind of down for whatever, and Alexis is like, oh, I'll just, we'll make this a temporary thing. Like, we'll just let it be what it is for now, but this is not going to be a long-term thing because my family and my friends, my life is so different than Daniel's that it's never going to work. But obviously you can imagine where this ends up going, and it's just beautiful, and I love it. Like I said, I like the back and forth switch between the characters. That made me want to keep on going. Plus, it was like the same situation happening in her chapter and then the same situation for his chapter, and you could see what they were both thinking. I really loved the banter between the two of them. They're both like funny and charismatic. I just felt like this was more of it just felt more natural reading the dialogue between the characters, and I liked how they spoke to one another. I also really loved the small town. There was one point actually that this book made me tear up because like the community was coming together and helping, and that was just so cute to me and so beautiful. I didn't cry, but I definitely teared up just imagining that and like longing for that almost. Just like a small town where everybody helps everybody. It was so sweet. Now, the reason that I dinged it 1/2 star is because I think it could have been a little bit shorter. It was just a lot of repetitiveness, a lot of like, oh, this isn't gonna work, this is why it's not gonna work, this isn't gonna work, this is why it's not gonna work. And I think maybe like 75 pages could have been cut from this. Certain stories could have been cut from it. I think it's still a great book. Definitely worth reading. Like I said, this is my new favorite romance book, but that's why I took it off. Like, it could have been a little bit shorter and then it would have gotten the 5 stars. Yeah, but overall, love this book. I would read it again and definitely recommend. Now, this isn't the next book that I read. I didn't read Yours Truly right after that, but this is the second book following Part of Your World. But I did read it later in March, so I'm just going to go ahead and talk about it. Now, technically, you could read these 2 books separately, but I definitely suggest reading Part of Your World first, because if you read Yours Truly first, there's going to be some spoilers in this. Like, Alexis and Daniel are in this book. But this one follows Bree and Jacob, and Bree is a character that is mentioned pretty frequently in the first book. So Bree is like Alexis's best friend and co-worker in the first book, so then we get to see her story. She's also a doctor, and she's also about to get promoted at the hospital she's working at. However, she's also going through a divorce, and then her brother is very sick. I think he has like kidney failure or some sort of kidney disease. I apologize, I cannot remember. But then the promotion ends up being like, she's pretty set that she's going to get this promotion, but then things get delayed because there is this new guy at the hospital, Jacob. I can't remember what his doctor name is. But yeah, she ends up literally running into him, and that's really like their first impression of each other. Like, it doesn't start off on the right note. She thinks he's there to take his position. He sees her and like thinks she's beautiful and stuff, but she ran into him and ended up breaking his phone. But then he sees that she is going toward her brother, who's at the hospital. But then that leads to these notes being exchanged between each other, and I loved that part. Like, they were exchanging notes at the hospital and letters, and it was so cute. And also, I love the banter between this. Love the notes, love the banter. They both had a good sense of humor, like talking about how Taco Bell gives you diarrhea and that thing. Like, I really like that when people are just like direct and upfront about things. Abby Jimenez is great with the dialogue between characters. Now, going into this one, I thought I would like it more than Part of Your World, because if you look at it, like, this is a lot of people's favorites. They like this one more than Part of Your World. I do not agree. I give this a 3.5 stars out of 5. I do still think it's worth reading. And the first half of this, I loved it. Like, I wanted to continue reading it. But then I feel like it really just dragged on and on and on. Like, these are 30-something-year-old adults, and they end up like fake dating, which I don't know that I love the fake dating thing. I don't know. I think this might be my first time coming across a book where there's fake dating, but I could be wrong. The other thing too is that like they're fake dating, but they both like each other, and they're just not communicating like 30-something-year-old adults, and that really annoyed me. But then once they do actually start communicating, I feel like there wasn't much left in the story. Like, I wanted to see them more as a couple, like have that more involved in the book. I also think this one could have been shorter, 75 to 100 pages shorter. They could have just, if they spoke to each other, I think we could have had more of their story and their romance. This also has great representation of anxiety in like social anxiety and anxiety in men. But to me, I actually found that really annoying. I didn't like his anxious thoughts. Like, I didn't like reading them. But both were great books. I'm excited to read more of Abby Jimenez books because, yeah, this was a great introduction to her. All right, I read The Stillwater Girls by Minka Kent. I don't know why or when I bought this, but I think it was probably on sale and then on Amazon, and it had good reviews, so I was like, okay. And plus, I'm always down for a thriller. This follows the story of, so this is another one that switches back and forth between the characters. It follows Ren and her sister, and then Nicolette, this woman. So let me first say that I give this a 4 stars out of 5. I very much enjoyed this book. But as far as the story goes, so Ren and her sister live in this tiny house, and their mother left to like go, I think their younger sister was sick, and so their mom was taking her into town to get her help. Now, all that her and her sister know are this house, and that's literally all they have. Like, they have some goats, they have chickens and stuff to lay eggs, but they're quickly running out of food, and they end up being alone in that house for like a month. But they are also very afraid to leave because their mother raised them to be like, oh no, you don't go past into the woods because it's very dangerous out there. But then eventually this man ends up coming to their house, and he comes into the house and is staying with, like, forcefully staying with them. And he's like, we're leaving in the morning. I think he's waiting for, I can't remember why they're waiting. I think he wanted the mom to come back because they were like, oh, our mom will be back any second. They're obviously very scared of this man. He wasn't explaining who he was or why he was there. So understandably so, the two sisters were very scared. So they're like, we need to get out of here. And that's what they attempt to do and end up trying to do. Now, on the other hand, Nicolette is this woman who is basically having kind of like marriage troubles or just having all of these thoughts. It was interesting because I didn't know where it was going to go with Nicolette, like why we were getting her story. She finds a photo of a child with her husband, and she's like, oh my God, he's often not at home, or he's like, she noticed that money is leaving their account, and she's like, oh my God, he's having an affair. So we get to follow both of their stories, and it comes together very nicely. There's a couple of twists in here that were very enjoyable and unpredictable, at least to me. Again, with that character switch, like going between Ren and Nicolette, it's like, okay, I gotta keep reading because now I need to know Ren's side again. And then I'm like, oh God, I need to know Nicolette's side. So yeah, I love that so much because I will just eat this up. This was a little bit scary. There were parts of it where I felt like anxious about what was happening, you know, because the way it was described was definitely scary, but this was not graphic at all, which I appreciated. And overall, just, I really enjoyed this. This was great. I would say this is maybe like a 4.25, not just a 4. I can't remember why I went any lower. It could be a 4.5 even. This was a good book. I liked it a lot. Then I read None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. I gave this a 3.75 out of 5. I'm sure many of y'all have heard about this, but this is a book by Lisa Jewell. And I do want to say, I think I've read the most books by Lisa Jewell than any other author. And the reason for that is because the reason I got back into fiction reading is because of Lisa Jewell. This was during COVID, so in 2020, I found a little free library in a neighborhood near me. And in that little free library was Then She Was Gone by Lisa Jewell. And I read that book within a few days. And ever since then, I haven't stopped reading. So I will always give her a chance. I would say Then She Was Gone is one of her top books, but I've read several of her other books, and she's usually hit or miss. Like they're pretty memorable books, but nothing like groundbreaking. I would say if you read this book by Lisa Jewell and you find it to be slow or you don't really like it too much, then Lisa Jewell probably is not the author for you, because I would say this is one of her faster paced books along with Then She Was Gone. I feel like I've heard this book described by like a million different booktubers, so I apologize if you're hearing this summary. But this follows Alex and Josie. Again, we have the character switch, so love that because it makes me want to keep reading. So Alex is turning 45 or 46, whatever age it is, and going to celebrate at a restaurant, and so is Josie. And Josie sees Alex and ends up going to her in the bathroom and being like, hey, I think we're birthday twins, and saying like they're born at the same hospital and they're the same age, blah, blah, blah. Well, Josie finds out that Alex has a podcast, and in her podcast, she interviews women, like powerful women or people who have done great things with their life, whatever. But then Josie suggests to Alex, hey, I should be on your podcast because I am making a life change. Like, I am really turning my life around. So Alex keeps interviewing Josie and finding out more and more about this woman who ends up being kind of a trip, you know? Like, all these things keep happening. And it's also really interesting because they make it's like a Netflix documentary that this turns into. So it's like giving you glimpses of this documentary and what you would be seeing on the screen. And then it goes back to the perspective of Josie and Alex. So this was really fun to read through. I've heard that the audiobook version of this is really good because of that aspect, like the podcast side of it, but also the Netflix things. So all this stuff keeps happening. She finds out more and more about Josie. She's questioning more and more about Josie, and just like she keeps sneaking into her life more than she really wants her to, basically. And yeah, you kind of get the whole backstory of everything. You get to hear the stories from like Josie's husband, Josie's children, Josie's mom, even Alex's husband is involved in stuff. So there's just a lot being uncovered in this story. Now, the first half of this book, I absolutely loved it. Like, I did not want to put it down. I had mentioned in a vlog recently that I was reading this, and like I did not want to, I just was so excited to keep reading it. But maybe halfway through or 3/4 of the way through, I was like, just not as interested. I still don't know exactly what's missing from the story, like the last half of the story, but there was something that was just not pulling me in like the first half was. It was almost like too much happening or something. And I do feel like the end of this was very busy, and it left me with a lot of questions. Like with the title even, like none of this is true. As you read it, obviously you're questioning, you're bringing that title back to the front of your mind. But even at the end, I'm like, I don't know. And I think Lisa Jewell did that on purpose. And I don't want to like y'all can read this yourself and see what you think. But it left me with just a lot more questions than I anticipated. I do believe that this is worth reading though. Like I would still, suggest it to friends and family to check it out. But just don't expect too much from it, I suppose. The last book that I read was Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. And this is my first Riley Sager book, and let me give the rating. So I give this a 3.5 stars out of 5. I do want to continue picking up more Riley Sager books just because I have seen him recommended so many times. Different people like different ones of his books. And the reason I got this one was because it was one of his, like, I don't know, I read a blog post or a couple of blog posts and people said that this was his best one. But I don't think I'm going to think that because this was a 3.5 out of 5. This one kind of does a character switch, but instead it's, you're getting like a story within a story. So this is called Home Before Dark, but then there is House of Horrors in here, which it's like you're reading this book, House of Horrors, and then you're switching to the perspective of the main character, Maggie, like in real time. So this House of Horrors covers the house that Maggie and her parents were living in. It was just a few weeks that they were living there. Her father is the author of the story, The House of Horrors, and he is describing what they experienced at this house, what he experienced at the house, including like noises that he would hear, the lights being on when he knows he didn't turn them on, a record player being turned on, his daughter doing weird things, the main character Maggie. She was doing weird things and saying weird things and seeing things. So there's definitely some spookiness in this. Like this is kind of like The Haunting of Hill House, that Netflix show. But Maggie in present day, she's now like 30 years old. So this was from, I think she's 31. So this was 25 years ago that they were living in this haunted house. And now it's 25 years later and her father has passed away and she inherited that house. Now her mother is like, hey, I'm going to buy the house from you and then like you don't have to deal with it. But Maggie decides that she wants to go to that house, renovate it, but also get more answers about the house because she doesn't remember anything from that time. At the time when they were living in this said haunted house, she was 6 years old and she's like, this whole book is a lie because I don't remember any of those things happening. The only, like, my memories are just from this book. And so I think my parents are lying and I want to get down to the bottom of it. So she goes to this house, stays there, renovates it, and she starts experiencing some weird things while she's there as well. So then she's like, oh my God, maybe he was telling the truth. And it slowly exposes what's happening and the story, which I feel like with this one, toward the end of it was also kind of busy, like just a lot being dumped on you, a lot happening at the end. And I was kind of disappointed. I think this had so much more potential. I think some things were not explained fully, like why was that happening if that was the case, So yeah, I just, same with this one, I didn't get a lot of my questions answered. Some parts of this were for sure a little bit spooky and I'm like, ooh, there was one time I was reading this in bed and there was a part that they were like hearing something And it was nighttime when I was reading this, and like we had our window open and I heard a noise outside, and it like startled me because I was like so invested in the book. But I actually was hoping to be more scared throughout this because of like the reviews that I read, but I don't think it was that scary. I did still find the book quite enjoyable. Like 3.5 isn't horrible. That's not a horrible rating. And his writing is very nice. I love the way he writes, so I definitely want to read more of his books, and I think I'll probably like his other ones more, hopefully. Something that is tripping me up about this book, though, is the title. Like, I still, to this day, randomly think, like, Home Before Dark. Why is it called that? I don't know why it's called Home Before Dark, because it's about a haunted house, and like it's literally focused around her being at the house. Like she doesn't get there before dark, or you know what I'm saying? So I just thought that was strange. I am not sure why he went with that title, but if you've read this and you can think of any ideas, please let me know. That's everything I read in March. So far in April, I'm not doing too strong. How many days in are we? I'm 6 days in, and I'm still on the same book that I started reading at the end of March. And I know that this month I want to read the third book in the ACOTAR series. What is it called? A Court of Wings and Ruin. ACOWAR. And I'm intimidated by that. That's why I read all these books. Because I was like, okay, I'm going to read this book, and then I'm going to move on to the third book of ACOTAR. And then I was like, no, let's go to another one. I was really in a thriller mood for March, and I still kind of am. But I do also really want to continue the series and finish out the ACOTAR series. So hoping to get to that in April. Comment down below if you've read any of these books or what you're currently reading and what you think of it. If you recommend it, I will happily add it to my growing list of books I want to read. But thank y'all so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video.